3:48 p.m., Taiwan Strait, a gray churning sea under a heavy, overcast sky. The Taiwan Coast Guard vessel Anping, a nimble catamaran hull corvette, was executing what should have been a standard intercept of a ghost ship, an unmarked steel trawler drifting suspiciously within the contiguous zone, its AIS, transponder dark. The crew prepared for a routine boarding, suspecting smugglers or illegal sand dredgers, but as the Anping closed to within 500 meters, the situation disintegrated. The trawler didn't heave to, it signaled. Suddenly, the radar screens on the Anping and the destroyer Keelong 10 miles out erupted into a chaotic storm of red contact markers. The trawler wasn't a fishing boat, it was a command node. In seconds, the empty ocean was filled with the high-pitched whine of engines as 46 unmanned suicide vessels materialized from the mist, locking the Taiwanese cutter in a lethal synchronized killbox. They thought they were enforcing the law. Instead, they had walked directly into a gray zone ambush designed to start a war. This is that story. What happens when a swarm meets a slaughter? The presence of the Anping in Sector Zulu 4 was not a random patrol. It was the tip of the spear in Operation Porcupine, Taiwan's asymmetric answer to mainland aggression. For months, Taipei's naval intelligence had tracked a disturbing evolution in the gray zone tactics employed by the People's Liberation Army Navy (PLAN). The strategy had shifted from harassment by manned militia boats to the deployment of unmanned Blue Shark suicide drones hidden aboard converted civilian motherships. The target vessel, a rusted steel hulk drifting 22 nautical miles off the coast, was legally stateless. It flew no flag and broadcast no AIS signature, a direct violation of international maritime safety protocols. Under Article 110 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS, the Anping had absolute legal authority to conduct a right of visit to verify the ship's nationality and intent. This was a lawful police action conducted in broad daylight, with every command recorded by bridge cameras and transmitted in real time to the Joint Operations Center in Taipei. However, Beijing had scripted this encounter differently. They weren't interested in maritime law. They were interested in political theater. The trawler was a Trojan horse, a floating logistics hub packed with high-bandwidth transmitters and drone charging stations. The strategic goal was to lure a Taiwanese capital ship into a close-quarters ambush where its heavy missiles would be useless, swarm it with expendable drones, and force a humiliating surrender or a catastrophic collision. If Taiwan fired, Beijing would cry massacre of fishermen. If Taiwan did nothing, they would lose control of their own waters. It was a damned if you do, damned if you don't trap designed to paralyze the Taiwanese command structure. But the planners in the Eastern Theater Command made a fatal assumption. They treated the Anping like a standard patrol boat, ignoring the fact that underneath its white Coast Guard paint, it was a Tuojiang-class catamaran, a carrier-killer hull built for speed and integrated into a data link network that included E-2K Hawkeye early warning aircraft, circling at 2,000 feet. The trap was set, but the prey was armed to the teeth. The escalation wasn't gradual, it was instantaneous. At 3:52 p.m., the fishing mothership dropped its rear ramp, and the ocean seemed to boil. The Anping surface search radar was immediately saturated. 46 distinct contacts accelerated from 0 to 50 knots in seconds, fanning out in a classic wolfpack formation. These weren't erratic fishing boats. They were Haiyan-class unmanned surface vessels, USVs, low-profile drone boats packed with high-explosive warheads and programmed for a coordinated suicide strike. The bridge of the Anping flooded with the screeching alarms of the collision avoidance system, painting a terrifying picture. Red vectors converging from every azimuth, leaving no escape route. Simultaneously, the radio crackled to life, but not with a surrender. A robotic pre-recorded voice broadcasted on channel 16 inches, standard Mandarin Taiwan vessel, you are illegally harassing civilian fishing operations. Cease maneuvers immediately or face self-defense measures. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Beijing was creating a digital trail of victimhood while actively closing the net. Captain Lin, commanding the Anping, didn't waste breath arguing with a recording. He slammed the general quarters alarm. The klaxon wailed through the ship, sending crew members scrambling to battle stations. The 20mm Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, CIWS, on the stern spun up with a mechanical whine, its radar frantically trying to prioritize 46 incoming targets. The optical fire control director locked onto the lead drone, displaying a range of just 1,200 meters and closing at 25 meters per second. This was the saturation nightmare naval theorists had warned about for years. The Anping was equipped to fight destroyers, not a swarm of explosive mosquitoes. If they opened fire, they started a war. If they hesitated for 30 more seconds, they would be sunk. The rules of engagement were blurry, but the physics were crystal clear. 46 warheads were 90 seconds away from impact. The Anping was alone in the kill box, and the drones weren't slowing down, they were accelerating. At 3:55 p.m., the diplomatic charade evaporated in a violent flash of orange and black. The lead USV, ignoring the Anping's final audio warnings, executed a hard tactical turn and lunged at the corvette's port quarter. It was a suicide run. The drone detonated its 50-kilogram high-explosive warhead just meters from the hull. The massive concussive blast rocked the 600-ton catamaran, violently shattering bridge windows and spraying the superstructure with jagged steel shrapnel. This was no longer a gray zone, it was a combat zone. The first shot had been fired by Beijing's proxies, shattering the political ambiguity the militia relied on. Inside the Anping's bridge, amidst the screaming alarms and the smell of cordite, Captain Lin didn't panic. He didn't pause to ask for permission from Taipei. The rules of engagement were now crystal clear: self-defense against an active swarm attack. He keyed the fleet-wide tactical net, his voice cutting through the static with terrifying calm. Vampire, vampire, vampire. All stations, this is Anping. Taking fire. Executing Defensive Protocol Alpha. This wasn't a desperate plea for help, it was a coordination order. The Anping immediately executed a high-G turn to unmask its aft batteries, while simultaneously transmitting the precise targeting data of every single remaining drone to the Tuojiang-class destroyer, waiting just over Du Riser. The militia thought they were bullying a lonely Coast Guard cutter. They had actually just triggered a fleet-level kill chain, and the response would be far heavier than a few machine gun rounds. At 3:58 p.m., the Taiwan Strait turned into a slaughterhouse of precision engineering. The response wasn't a panic fire of machine guns, it was a calculated algorithmic purge. The Anping, utilizing the targeting solution generated by the E-2K Hawkeye circling at 2,000 feet, unleashed the full fury of its modernized arsenal. But they didn't fire standard anti-ship missiles, which would have passed harmlessly through the fiberglass hulls of the small drones. Instead, they initiated the shotgun protocol. From the horizon, two Tuojiang-class stealth corvettes racing at 40 knots to support their sister ship opened fire with their 76mm Otto Melara super rapid guns, loaded not with standard shells, but with specialized 3P, pre-fragmented programmable proximity airburst ammunition. Simultaneously, the Anping launched a salvo of modified missiles equipped with proximity-fused cluster warheads, weapons designed specifically for this gray zone nightmare. The result was a terrifying display of area denial. The warheads didn't impact the drones directly, they detonated 20 meters above the water, showering the Blue Shark swarm with thousands of tungsten fragments moving at supersonic speeds. It was a curtain of steel rain that shredded delicate sensors, punctured fuel tanks, and severed control uplinks instantly. The high-end drones built for speed but lacking armor didn't stand a chance against physics. One by one, the red dots on the Anping's tactical display began to blink out. The 76mm guns cleaned up the stragglers with robotic precision firing at a rate of 120 rounds per minute, each shell programmed to explode at the exact microsecond it passed the drone. There was no need for human aiming. The fire control computers calculated the lead, the windage, and the wave motion, turning the engagement into a mathematical equation where the variable X was the destruction of Chinese hardware. The swarm, which had looked so formidable moments ago, was being systematically dismantled by a defense network that treated them not as threats, but as target practice. The American electronic warfare aircraft operating in the periphery added the final nail in the coffin, jamming the control frequencies so effectively that the remaining drones simply spun in circles, waiting to be executed by the Taiwanese gunners. By 4:43 exactly 55 minutes after the first radar contact, the deafening roar of the 76mm cannons faded into an eerie silence, broken only by the crackle of burning lithium batteries bobbing in the swell. The Blue Shark swarm, which had threatened to overwhelm the Taiwanese defenses through sheer mass, was now nothing more than a smoking debris field stretching for 3 nautical miles. The Anping drifted through the graveyard of Chinese ambition, its hull scarred by shrapnel, but its flag still flying high. The scorecard was absolute and humiliating: 46 unmanned vessels utterly annihilated, 0 Taiwanese sailors lost, and the myth of the unstoppable swarm shattered against the hard reality of programmable ammunition. The command mothership, the rusty trawler that had started it all, was now floating dead in the water, its control link severed, its weapon system erased. It sat there like a quarterback whose entire offensive line had just been vaporized, helpless, and exposed under the guns of the very corvette it tried to trap. But the battle wasn't just one with high explosives, it was one with high-definition video. Before the smoke had even cleared, Beijing's propaganda machine attempted to spin the narrative, releasing a pre-prepared statement accusing Taiwan of massacring unarmed fishermen in a barbaric act of piracy. They expected the world to see only the burning wreckage. But Taiwan had learned from Ukraine. Within minutes, the Ministry of National Defense uploaded the unedited 4K resolution footage from the Anping's bridge cameras and the overhead drones to social media. The world didn't see fishermen. They saw 46 military-grade suicide boats executing a coordinated attack run. The footage clearly showed the initial detonation against the Anping's hull, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt who fired the first shot. The victim narrative collapsed instantly. The Chinese mothership, realizing the game was up and the cameras were rolling, turned tail and limped back toward the mainland, leaving its burning fleet behind as a testament to a tactical disaster. It was a complete operational failure. They lost the ships, they lost the surprise, and most importantly, they lost the line. This engagement sent a shockwave through the strategic planning committees in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran, dismantling the prevailing wisdom that quantity has a quality of its own. For years, the People's Liberation Army (PLA) has invested billions into the concept of militia swarms, the idea that thousands of cheap, expendable vessels could simply overwhelm the sophisticated but expensive magazines of Western navies. They believed that a $50,000 drone boat could trade positively against a $2 million missile. But the 55-minute destruction of the Blue Shark fleet proved that this calculus is fundamentally flawed when facing a networked adversary. Taiwan demonstrated that you don't need million-dollar missiles to kill cheap drones. You just need smart bullets and better math. The use of programmable airburst ammunition turned the economic equation upside down. A few $100s worth of 76mm shells wiped out millions of dollars of Chinese hardware, proving that in a high-intensity environment, low-tech swarming is not a masterstroke, it is a suicide pact. Furthermore, this incident exposed the fragile Achilles heel of the entire gray zone doctrine, command and control. The swarm is terrifying only when it acts as a cohesive unit. The moment the American and Taiwanese electronic warfare suite severed the link between the mothership and the drones, the wolf pack became nothing more than a collection of blind, drifting hazards. This is the stark reality of modern naval warfare, that autocracies struggle to accept centralized control is a liability. While the Taiwanese commanders on the Anping had the autonomy to execute complex firing solutions instantly, the Chinese drone operators were paralyzed by jamming and rigid hierarchies. The message sent to the world is unambiguous. Whether it is Iranian fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz or Russian corvettes in the Black Sea, attempting to bully a modern data-linked naval force with brute numbers is like bringing a knife to a drone fight. You might scratch the paint, but you will not survive the encounter. The Porcupine is not just spiked, it is electrifying, and trying to swallow it whole will only result in choking on your own ambition. Beijing wanted a blockade simulation. Instead, they got a live-fire recycling operation. This incident serves as a brutal reminder that the Taiwan Strait is not a training ground for amateurs, nor is it a theater for political stunts. It is one of the most heavily monitored and weaponized stretches of water on Earth. The 46 destroyed vessels drifting in the currents are proof that while you can mass-produce hulls, you cannot mass-produce competence. Taiwan's message was delivered not in a diplomatic cable, but in 55 minutes of high-explosive efficiency. Do not mistake restraint for weakness, and do not confuse a Coast Guard patrol for a soft target. If you enjoyed watching a multi-million-dollar swarm turn into an artificial reef, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Next up, we're looking at how Taiwan's artillery is digging in to turn the beaches into a nightmare. You won't want to miss it.